All right, like everyone else, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and speak to you about kind of what I'm going to hit on 3 topics, and I'll show you here the traffic planning and the future of transportation. But I wanted to do sort of 3 things: introduce you to traffic engineering so that you understand sort of things that we take care of. I think it's quite a lot. We're a division that we don't just do maintenance, we don't just do design, planning, things like that. We do it all. So some of the things we do, we actually have 3 sections. So our director is Jeff Neal. Great guy, so he's really he helps lead us. One of our sections is NTMP signs and markings. So NTMP stands for Neighborhood Traffic Management Plan, and those are that's the group that helps you all determine ways to help slow down traffic through your neighborhood. But they don't just do that. They do sign maintenance and installations on all of our city streets and actually on our signal system. So if it's on the state route, they'll usually handle the state route signs, but otherwise it's us. Changes to pavement markings. So when Streets and Roads goes in and repaves, if we don't give them any input, usually they'll put back what's down. But if we got an idea, we'll make some updates and changes. They also do the handicap on-street parking. So if you have a spot where there's no driveway, things like that, you're handicapped, give us a call, and that's something we can get done. And then of course yellow curbing, and like I mentioned, NTMP program that'll end up things like speed tables and traffic circles. If you're more interested in that, we have an application on our website. The other section is traffic signal systems. They do kind of what you would think, your traffic signal timing. They manage the signal detection devices, ITS infrastructure. So think the state's actually doing a wrong way driving warning system on all of our interstate ramps. So that's an ITS type project. That's not something we're in charge of. And then one thing I forgot to put on here actually is the fiber optic network. So Lexington has about 20 years ago, through grants and different things, we started building out our own fiber optic network, primarily to serve the signal system. It actually now has got so big, it's over 100 miles. We actually manage the whole fiber network for most of the city. So we connect all the municipal buildings, most of the municipal buildings in the city. And then one thing I thought was kind of as far as sustainability, I know about 15 years ago, all of our traffic signals, the bulbs were incandescent. And so I think we used about $60,000 a month in electricity. Since about 2007, it took about 5 years, but all the incandescents were replaced at LEDs. And now it's about a tenth. The power usage is about a tenth. I think it just runs 4 amps to run an intersection. And we actually had a guy whose sole job was to come in at night and replace bulbs. So we don't need him anymore. TE, right? And that's like I said, we're the representative for the Planning Commission. That's myself. There's also the Board of Adjustment. So changes to numerical aspects, requirements in the zoning ordinance. If you say, my site's special for this reason, instead of doing this buffer at 8 feet, I think it needs to be 6. You go to the Board of Adjustment. We have someone there representing traffic topics there. Building inspection and review. So what happens after the zoning and the BOA? It's kind of a top-down, pretty broad view at each development. Once it gets past those 2 approvals, then it goes to our building inspection and review process. We have a representative there. That's when they look at the construction drawings, and that's when they make sure what you said you were going to do before, you're actually doing. We also do signal design. So on city streets, we complete most of the designs in-house. When they're in commercial areas, they'll handle it, and the state handles that. The KU's lease lighting program, we manage that as well. So all the street lights you see around are actually leased from KU. And we handle the billing, which is kind of a nightmare, but we handle all that. And if you have any outages, let us know. They're in the process of a massive switch from high-pressure sodium to LED. I think we have about 36,000 street lights. It's going to take a long time. But if you let us know if that bulb out, especially if it's a high-pressure sodium, they're going to replace it with LED. That's all they do now. So, and then T permits and then other special projects as needed, kind of thing. And I want to talk about, we talk about traffic problems in Lexington. We do have a unique kind of situation. We're a hub and spoke city, which essentially means we have the arterials jutting out, and you have New Circle going around and Man of War kind of going around. And while that can cause more issues as far as management of the traffic, the daily ingress and egress, you look at some of the circumferential routes that were kind of uncompleted. Rosemont was actually supposed to connect with what is now Alumni, extend over. Man of War originally was envisioned to go north. Cooper Drive was supposed to continue. But I think if you look at the alternatives, just the extension of Rosemont and Man of War, if we lose Calumet, we'd lose the Arboretum. So I think most people wouldn't trade those off. And another, if you get interested, go to our engineering Guys in engineering, they have the actual plans for, the original plans were when the interstate was going to bisect the city. So it's really, the plans were drawn up, thank God, never done. We would have had an interchange in Belcourt and an interchange at Davis Bottom. So I think those they would have actually made urban traffic flow a little bit better, but I think quality of life would have taken a heck of a hit. So thankfully, that didn't happen. Some of the things we do when we go to Planning Commission, we just look at regular pedestrian vehicular safety, ingress, egress, things like that. We try to work with the developer to include new sidewalks, new signals if necessary, traffic calming in existing neighborhoods or new development, pavement markings, signage. There's always context sensitivity. So some things that work in one area may not fit in another. And then one thing I really wanted to discuss was traffic studies, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what traffic studies are supposed to achieve, at least in the way they're done as far as the development process. Typical traffic study we have is called a traffic impact study, so the TIS view. In our zoning, if you have greater than 100 new trips along an adjacent street identified as a high congestion area, you have to do a traffic study. Greater than 100 trips in the peak hour. Or if you anticipated to generate greater than 200 in the peak hour, you got to do a traffic study. But relatively few developments meet these thresholds. So we can, in the subdivision committee, request that if we think it's a specific need, even if it doesn't meet the thresholds. But I wanted to go over what the purpose of a traffic study is. So sometimes we hear people say, well, has there been a traffic study done on this? I just wanted to say a traffic study doesn't determine if a development is appropriate or not. That is what the Planning Commission and City Council are for. So traffic study, you measure the trip generation potential, and the way you do that is there's actually a manual that has dozens of different uses. You look through that manual, find your use, determine how many square footage or how many students are going to be in your school, and there's a formula that'll spit out roughly what, based on their previous studies, what new trips have come from that. And then from that trip generation potential, you determine your traffic impact on the existing infrastructure. So you'll measure the existing traffic and things like that. And then when you add the existing traffic with the new, then you say, well, how's my infrastructure look? And then if you need new turn lanes, things like that, that's where that should reveal itself. But there are some downsides to the way we've done traffic studies. They're typically suburban and vehicle oriented, so they don't really look at pedestrian movement, how a pedestrian will use the quality of life of the environment. It's just essentially a numbers game of ingress and egress and how much the development traffic will generated. There are unintended consequences of induced demand. So this is kind of a broad topic, but effectively induced demand is if you build, so say you widen something and build new lanes, increase capacity, people will make different mode choices at different times, and you can actually not increase demand in general, but at a particular time. So you actually can, over a number of years, those traffic issues can and typically do return. It's an imperfect but economical methodology. So when we talk about trip generation of these traffic studies, well, why do we do them? It's because they're not perfect, but they're economical. And I'll show you an example of why they're not perfect. So a use is a fast food restaurant with a drive-through. Arby's and Chick-fil-A are both fast food restaurants with a drive-through. If you go in and put your square footage, if they have, that's one of the ways you kind of calculate it. They both are 2,000 square feet. You go in, put your formula is going to spit out the exact same number of trips. And we both know, nothing against Arby's, but Chick-fil-A is going to have a bigger impact. So we have to, but that's the way they're done. So we've got to take it with a grain of salt. We have to use our engineering judgment and our common sense about how these impacts are actually going to affect the surrounding facilities. But again, your alternative is to test your neighborhood for all these different uses, put your own study together, and that just becomes impractical for the most part. There are some other studies that have come about. There's a parking demand mitigation study. So Lexington doesn't have any parking requirements. If you want to build a development, you're not required to provide parking for that development. And the idea is that we overcome some of the overparking that's occurred over the last 50 years. So some of the places, if you go at Richmond Road where the Sherwin-Williams is, there's probably 300 parking spaces, maybe a third of them are used. So it's a lot of land. We want our land is valuable, so we want it to be used. But anyway, parking demand mitigation study is developers showing how they're going to mitigate the amount of parking needed. And one of the ways we can actually leverage that, there was a project on Paris Pike. They said, Well, our parking demand is going to be mitigated because there's a transit stop across the street. Well, that's fantastic. There's no way to get there there's no crossing, there's nothing. So the way we leverage it is, well, if you say this is how you're going to mitigate it, you need to provide a safe crossing as part of your development. The multimodal plans for very large areas, they've got to show how they're accommodating not just vehiculars, but pedestrian, transit, and bikes. These are kind of intended to address items not traditionally addressed by TIS. All right, the future of transportation. This is more of a philosophical discussion that I'll show you some examples of what I mean. So, kind of the new approach is not even really new anymore. Is Vision Zero, and so essentially traffic deaths are preventable. Integrate human failing into your design and approach. We're looking to prevent not all crashes, but fatal and severe crashes. That actually, and then there's a systems approach, which means you don't just do it through design of transportation. It's vehiculars, it's education, and I'll go through. And then saving lives is not expensive. We actually have actuarial values of a human life, which is pretty morbid, but based on that, you can understand that it's important to make these design changes and philosophical changes in order to prevent fatal and severe injuries. This is a little FHWA, so this is kind of a top-down federal approach to not just design, but safe road users, post-crash care, safe speeds by design, and things like that. What exactly is changing? So traditionally we're capacity focused. Most projects, especially larger ones, were going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, 4 lanes to 6 lanes, and so on, just as long as we need to. Anymore, it's safety focused. How do we, capacity, is getting very, very expensive to keep increasing capacity, especially in urbanized areas such as this. So safety focus, how do we reduce fatal and injury collisions? Eliminate bike ped facilities. A lot of times if that put things over budget, cut them. And that's something that would happen. Large lane widths in every environment. So 12-foot lane is an interstate lane. Most of our routes in the urban area have also been designed with 12 feet in mind. It's a very wide roadway. It encourages high-speed driving because you're comfortable with those speeds. There's actually a calculation, and one of the variables, a calculation on how fast a free flow speed would be, and one of the variables is lane width. The smaller the lane width, to a point, the slower you're expected to get, the person to be expected to go. Increased safety was presumed. We're going from 2 lanes in a congested environment to 4. It's going to be safer, of course. No, not necessarily, especially in off-peaks. You may reduce congestion in the peaks, but now off-peaks become much easier to speed, much more comfortable speed. And a rare use of innovative intersections, stop signs and traffic signals. That's all we really used for many, many years. And I'll show you some examples of innovative intersections. Lack of connectivity, too. That's more of a policy type decision, but that's something that can help increase sustainability in our neighborhoods as well. Underlying philosophy, if you kind of think of it this way, we're shifting towards building transportation networks for people who live in that area rather than a prime focus for those who commute through it. So it's a quality of life shift. Capacity focused. Now this is Winchester Road and New Circle Road. New Circle is north to south. This was always kind of an interchange before. They increased it, or not increased it, but they altered it, I think in the 90s, I believe, to what's called a single point urban interchange. While this is fantastic for getting vehicles through this area as quickly as you can, there's about 1,100 feet gap where you're just on the bridge in the middle of nowhere. If you're in a pedestrian or a bike, it's about a quarter of a mile almost where you're kind of a sitting duck. So in an urbanized area, this is not something we would try. We would, at least in the Fayette County side of things, we would push to not do these again. And also, we have a lot of data we can look at. If you go north of here, it's Meadow Lane, you go back to a signalized intersection. You go south, it's Trade Center. So all this is really achieved, at least on New Circle Road, is allowing people to increase their speed 15 to 20 miles an hour and then slow back down. So overall, there's nothing really to be gained because you're not getting anywhere any faster unless you're stopping at the bottom of the page. But this is East Brandon Extension. This was a project not that old. It was supposed to have sidewalks on it. That would push it over budget. It was eliminated. Let's get the project done. We don't do, this is in Jessamine County, but we don't allow this anymore. At least that's a Fayette County of approach, okay? This is right at the edge of development. It's going to continue, and then of course sidewalks. It's going to be much harder to get a sidewalk-only project done, at least as of now. And then lack of connectivity. This is Georgetown Road. These are some older neighborhoods. The neighborhood to the south and north were, I think, built by the 90s. And then the one in the middle was built sometime in the 90s or early 2000s. I can't. But the two red circles are where streets almost connect. They don't. So, and one of the frustrating things we get is, so obviously citizens, now if you see where the green dot is, that's a signalized intersection. To the left of that is a school. Okay, it used to be a church, now it's a school. We got a call from a council member asking, hey, how can we make improvements to the intersections to the north to help these people in this neighborhood get to the school? Well, we can certainly do that. But there's an intersection to the south. There's just no way for any students to actually move from the north to the south through the neighborhood where it would be most safe in order to cross there. So it's problems we think about today that really manifest tomorrow. Or excuse me, we don't think about today that manifest tomorrow. These are the kinds of things we're really pushing to stop in the future. Something I mentioned earlier, innovative intersections. So we're just going to go over three. There's actually dozens. There's a good Wikipedia transportation article you can go through and just look at all the different types. But the restricted crossing U-turn intersections. You may have heard the word R-cut before. North Carolina really pioneered kind of the use of those. They don't call them R-cuts anymore. They rebranded them with some other acronym because people had at the beginning had such a negative connotation. But they also don't, at least on the state routes, they don't start with traditional intersections anymore. They have a matrix. It's roundabouts if you're at a lower volume in, and then goes to R-cuts and then to other. So we've started doing these in Lexington, Kentucky. They look kind of like this. They're a little bit convoluted. Looking, at least from aerially, you actually can't take a left off the side streets. You have to go up, make a U-turn. You think, of course, I don't want to have to do that. That sounds convoluted and dangerous, but it eliminates that left turns. There's greater flexibility with the signal timing because you can do different cycle lengths. And less impact of pedestrian crossing on congestion. So you cross one leg if you're a pedestrian through the middle and then cross to the other side. But of the 5 intersections, this was amazing to me. So the 5 intersections in Kentucky that have been converted to an R-cut for greater than 3 years have seen a greater than 80% reduction in injury collisions. There's no results for anything else like that. For me, there's a lot of apprehension. If you actually go out to Richmond, Athens, Boonesboro, there's one we hope will be turned on by the end of the month. That'll be the first, and it should have a pretty good impact on safety. But yeah, if you go out there, I went out there today, so looks like they're just a few weeks from being able to turn that on. There will be mast arms eventually, but they take forever to get in place, and so it's a temporary signal at the moment. You'll all recognize this. So out in the Harrisburg Road, the double crossover diamond. I think it was touted kind of as a congestion solution, but more than that, it was an injury solution. So that left turn going from outbound onto outer loop New Circle Road was the highest incident of injury collision in the city before this project. There's been a greater than 40% reduction in injury collision. So that in and of itself, if you think of it as how much congestion injury causes, that's a reduction in congestion. So, and it has tends to actually reduce wrong way entry onto freeways, which are generally very deadly or serious crashes. And because of the movement, it reduces speeds as well, which is another indicator that severe injury can happen. And then there's new roundabouts. We all know what roundabouts are, but what is a turbo roundabout? So like a lot of things, the Europeans have been doing this for a while. So on 2-lane roundabouts, things get a little hairy, right? Reynolds Road was a 2-lane roundabout, not terribly well designed, but it was kind of early in the U.S. Roundabout days. But now some of these things like putting medians in. So once you make your choice, you're stuck with your decision. So, wish I could point, but anyway, if you're wanting to make a left, you get into that lane, you cross, and you got to make a left or come back around. So it actually reduces 76% reduction in injury collisions within a 2-lane roundabout, and actually the conflict point go from 32 in a standard intersection to just 14. So those conflict points, each of them are an opportunity for a crash. And I think that's kind of all the things I wanted to talk about. I did actually go back. The double crossover, there's another one going in at Leestown Road as well. That's probably a 2-year timeline, so it's going to be a little while. That project will actually connect the sidewalk infrastructure as well. So it should be really effective, again, doing the same things it did in Harrisburg Road. And then that is all the things at the moment. So.